questions as well. We're going to start off with a development management update from Dawn DePriest, who's our service manager for development management, followed by a piece on the proposed consultation on a consolidated Somerset-wide validation checklist, which we're hoping to go out to consultation on shortly. We'll then have a very short break, and then we will have an update on where we are with nutrient neutrality and phosphate mitigation. So I'm going to hand over to Dawn now. Dawn.
Thank you very much, and thank you for bearing with us. We're all fumbling around with different bits of IT, so thank you for your patience. Welcome. I'm just doing the development management update. So can you confirm if you can actually see the slides, please? Thumbs up. Yeah. Lovely. Thank you very much. Right. So in terms of structure, hopefully you know this bit already. So Alison Bloom-Cooper is in place as head planning officer or chief planning officer for the whole of the planning service. Beneath Alison, there is myself as service manager for development management. Kate Murdoch, who's in the room, the service manager for strategic policy and implementation. Helen Vittery, who's covering resources, integration, minerals and waste, and Nick Tate, who's covering placemaking and projects. So that includes a lot of the specialists and some of the major infrastructure projects. In terms of below that, because I have had some queries about what does the structure look like, what does the authority look like. So I will caveat this with, this is an interim structure at the moment, and the council is going through a council-wide restructure that we're going to get the details of nearer the end of the month. But in the interim, there is obviously Alison and myself, as previously covered, and then there are two area managers. So we've merged sort of north and west into one area and south and east into one area. So Gary Collins covers the north and west area. He's going to be presenting to you lucky people about registration checklist. And the South and East interim area manager, we've just managed to appoint someone who'll be starting nearer the end of the month. So there will be a name to go behind that. So that's following the departure of John Hammond. So below the area managers, we've still got operating geographically the area teams. So we've got the North team and the West team under Gary. Under the South and East, we've got the East and South planning teams. And then under myself directly, we've got the enforcement team that have all been clustered together into one team. And we've also formed a strategic sites team. So that's got a number of principal planners in it, dealing primarily with PPAs. So, and they are reporting direct to me. So that's just to give you an idea of the generalised structure. In terms of the issues that we've been experiencing, it's a year and a half since we merged together as a unitary authority, putting together sort of 5 or 6 different legacy IT systems and trying to retain and recruit staff as you're sort of settling after putting authorities together as a unitary has its own challenges. Nationally, you know, employing planners is actually quite problematic at the moment anyway. So we have had issues in terms of staff retention and recruitment. Historically, certain areas of the authority have also been quite heavily dependent on agency, and due to the financial crisis that the authority is going through, we are going to have to look at that and phase that out. So we are trying to get on top of a backlog whilst trying to phase out agency systems. We are, despite the fact, hopefully all our decision notices look the same, we've got 6 completely different IT systems operating in the background. So that's caused us some issue in terms of trying to make everything look the same from the outside and trying to standardise approaches. And as a result of everything, a year and a half later, there are still sometimes delays with registration in certain areas, determining planning applications and completing legal agreements. So despite what this slide looks like, it isn't a list of excuses. It's identifying the issues that we've got. So knowing the issues that we've got, we have and are undertaking a number of planning interventions. So in respect of IT, we are currently working with an external provider to look at performance management reporting, because from 6 different IT systems, you get 6 different answers to the same question. So we need consistency of reporting to be able to see how each of the areas are functioning. In terms of phosphates and legal, phosphates was a massive stall in terms of holding up applications, which meant we as a local authority held on to applications from 2020, 2021. And now that phosphate solutions are coming forward, that's great because it's releasing them and allowing them to move forward. But that does mean there's an influx of applications that then need to go through the habitats regulations assessment, get appropriate mitigation, get the credits, and then legal support. So as part of Somerset's drive to address that issue, there was significant funding that's been agreed and worked on to allow the release of those sites, which is brilliant, but they do pile up in the planning system then in terms of trying to get them through. Understanding that, there has also been funding put towards legal support to try and get those 106s through with a bit more bespoke resource towards it. In terms of standardisation, obviously from day one we were looking at decision notices and legal agreements. Finessing a legal agreement and getting it to say exactly the right thing is an ongoing situation, so we are still working on that, but we are also going to be moving to standardising pre-app and report formats. So hopefully you'll be looking at something that looks similar, sort of Somerset wide. In terms of area specific interventions, we're aware that West has been struggling in terms of getting ecology support. There are discussions about further support being moved into that area. In the South, we have worked on reducing officers' caseloads because the majority of officers were carrying sort of 70 to 90 applications on their caseloads. And if they're carrying that volume of work, they cannot turn through decisions. And obviously there's a lot of complaints as a result of applications getting stalled and lack of engagement. So as a result of that, we've also consolidated the floating cases in South. So there are area generic codes that we've now got a list of cases on that haven't yet got a determining officer, but we have then also recruited agency to pick up those cases and move them through specifically. So they won't be an area case officer, they're just tasked with picking up off of this floating list. And the other thing we've managed to do is we have been more flexible about the location of agency staff. So when we've had gaps and issues within certain area teams, they've been moved and dropped into those areas. And in terms of the strategic sites, that's now up and running. It is covering Somerset-wide PPAs, so we're not restricted to geographic areas, but all officers within the team are currently carrying PPAs supporting the South. So that will also help reduce the pressure on the South officers and increase determination of applications. And we are also trying to keep up to date on the planning update webpage so that you can sort of keep abreast of what the situation is moving forward. So in terms of supporting that approach, this will be going on the webpage, but hasn't yet because I wanted to run it through you people first. We are looking at a change in approach for determining applications and negotiating on applications. And I know there may be some strong views on this given our current performance and potential sort of delays in delivery. But effectively, we're looking at if there's no pre-app on the application, we're going to be determining the applications as submitted. If there is pre-app advice on the application, we will undertake minor negotiations, but obviously if we've given advice and you're completely ignoring it, we will determine it as submitted. Ongoing applications that are already subject to negotiations, because we've got a lot of those at the moment, we will be summarising what all the key issues are that remain, giving a date for submission of additional details, and then determining on those details to stop it going through the loop again and again and again. So we are looking to close off the protracted negotiations on live cases. And now that we've got sort of phosphate solutions, applications that were held in abeyance for phosphate solutions, will need to provide these now. if there isn't any phosphate mitigation being provided, the applications will be determined with a recommendation for refusal in terms of not being able to demonstrate that it has an acceptable impact on the HRA. And if we're looking at the fact that we've crashed the service together, I've taken all the cogs apart and we're trying to put the cogs back together, you as agents and applicants are the red cog in the middle. So I thought I'd put this slide up in terms of what can you do to help. We are working very, very hard in trying to get through the issues that we've got. We are aware of the issues that we've got and we are working on it. And the officers that are carrying caseloads have been working incredibly hard under really difficult circumstances. So, you know, publicly, I want to say thank you to the DM officers that are still up and operating. For you, in terms of what you can do to help support us in sort of addressing these issues, I'm going to say focus on validation. You'll get a presentation from Gary shortly on our approach to standardising the validation checklist. So that'll be the same list for the whole of Somerset. Please advise your clients on the challenges. If we can try and manage expectations at starting point, we are spending a lot of resources internally responding to chases on applications, delays, concerns about applications, all of which are valid. I'm not saying they're not valid, but if we can try and manage expectations at the outset, it will help. The other thing we've done is we have standardised the legal instruction sheet. So if you've got an application with 106, you may be sent the instruction sheet by the case officer. If you populate it and send it back, it would probably take you an hour. If that, it does get logic checked by the officer to make sure we've got all the obligations and all the triggers in it before it then goes up to legal. But once an application's got resolution to grant, obviously the speed of pushing it through the system can often slow down, whereas actually instructing legal is quite a critical point. Whereas if you're fundamental in the instruction, it tends to happen a little bit quicker. To appeal or not to appeal, I am getting lots of correspondence from people now raising questions about appealing on non-determination. Obviously, you are completely within your rights to appeal should you wish. The plea that I'm putting out is that all the effort we're putting into freeing up resource, the second we get an appeal, the case officers that are dealing with your planning application have to defend those appeals. And those appeals can't get extensions of times. So they end up taking capacity and priority over the applications we've got. So if there is a way to avoid non-determination appeals or, you know, engage with me and have discussions about it instead, please think about taking that approach, because it is, if we are getting non-determination appeals, it is going to take up the capacity that I'm trying ever so hard to release in the system. And beyond that, it was any other suggestions. So from the outside, you can obviously see what the service is doing well, what the service isn't doing very well. And actually, you might have a brilliant idea about what the service can do better to make improvements and run more smoothly. I am not going to profess for 1 second to have the answers to any of those questions. But if you've got any bright ideas, let me know. You know, we're more than happy to talk about it, to change, to shift. We are in the process of rebuilding the authority from what feels like scratch. So if something needs to evolve or something needs to change, now is a really good time to influence it. So it's just having that open door for you to contact us if you need to. So that's the end. I know there were some questions that came up. So I don't know if you want to do questions now or...
Yeah, I think we should take a few questions now. And there are some in the chat already. Particularly, first question is what the position is in Somerset North team with respect to validation. Yeah, whether you could pick that one up, Dawn.
Yeah, so the delays in Somerset North have been because of staff absences. We have been going on a recruitment drive and we have got 2 new starters. But with 2 new starters comes a bit of a learning curve in terms of picking up the tasks and undertaking them. Because we are now one council, what also happened is the other areas of registration started supporting. So there has been support coming in from the west area, from the east area, those other validation officers. So actually, whilst on the outside it looks horrendous, on the inside it was really heartening to see everyone starting to pull together. It's starting to improve, but it will be a bit of a slow process, but it is an area that we're looking at and reviewing on a weekly basis.
Thanks, Dawn. Secondly, there is some concern that there should be negotiations through the lifetime of an application, even if pre-application advice hasn't been sought, and that the service has a duty to work proactively with applicants to deliver sustainable development. Do you want to comment on that?
I would hope that we would get to a position where we can open that back up as an opportunity again. In terms of what we need to do to keep the applications flowing, we need to take a harsher line at the moment on how we are viewing and reviewing and responding to applications. When we get to a point where everyone's up and running and everyone's comfortable, I would hope we can relax that again. But at the moment, the work on hand, because we're getting through the 2020 and 2021 backlog, is so significant. If officers are negotiating on cases that haven't had any previous engagement, it's slowing up determination for everything else. So it's a tough call, and I found it really difficult, but I think it's what we need to do in the meantime to try and get the service back up and operating to an acceptable level.
I think there has to also be a recognition that the planning service, the local planning authority, are not planning consultants for your clients, and we're there to look and determine the application as submitted, essentially. So yes, we are required to work proactively, but I think that's on both sides. So people need to actually engage with us at pre-app, certainly on the bigger sites.
I'm just thinking, so I know there is a comment from Gary Berry about there only being one dedicated validation officer. There was a period of time where there was. We've currently got 3, and we are looping in support from DM as well as the other validators. So that was the situation, which is why there is such a significant backlog, but that is in hand. I'm just seeing whether...
Okay, there's something about the delays in the pre-app service. I think we're all conscious that we're not providing the service that we would like to provide at the moment. I think Dawn's explained the reasons for that. And yes, we are prioritising trying to get through the backlog of applications so that we can get back into a better position. We are, and I think Dawn's already indicated that for the South team, we've got 2 officers coming in next week, whose primary task will be to deal with those cases that are being held in the backlog at the moment. They won't be allocated any new cases, they will just be taken from the backlog. So we hope to address that and get that back into a steady state as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and in terms of point of contact for the floating applications, I have currently got a ticket in with IT because I'm aware that on the South system you can't currently see who the case officer is for your application on Planning Online. You can for all the other areas, so I have requested that that's amended so you can actually see. If we need visibility of that, you'll be able to see whether the application is in an area code or whether it comes to a case officer. If you're advised it's one of the floating ones, ultimately I'm your point of contact. So if you want to get hold of me, and then I am sort of directing the 2 agency staff. So one of them's already started, the other one's starting on Monday. So they are already starting to pick those up.
Okay, Colin Beggarman is still with the authority, and yes, he is still dealing with the cases that were on his list. Okay. Yes, we do try to keep the planning portals updated as far as we can. And the technical support team do put on to the planning portal as quickly as they can information that is provided and consultation responses, etc. We are very aware of what the MPPF says and requiring sustainable development to be approved. And if the perception is that DM are doing all they can to find fault, however minor, with applications, That is not the position that we take. Generally, that's not my approach or Dawn's approach to dealing with applications. And I think that's part of the culture of actually negotiating and trying to seek amendments on minor things. We need to determine them, are they good enough or do they need to be refused?
I think there's one question from Donna Collier about sort of staff being off long term. There have been some staff off long term. There are still some staff off long term. In terms of flexible use of agency, we have been going through recruitment and we have been replacing some agency with permanent staff, which is ultimately where we need to get to. As and when agency have been released, they've been moved over to support the gaps. So we are covering where we can the long-term gaps, and part of the reallocating the floating cases was part of the reallocating the backlog of the cases that were being held by officers that weren't present. So the floating pile of cases is a culmination of applications that were handed on to the case officers by another case officer that's left, or some of the caseload of some of the officers that have been off for a period of time. But we have got the additional resource of agency in there at the moment to try and address this issue in particular.
There's a comment here about collaboration between council and agents and working together. And yes, I totally agree that forums are a great opportunity for sharing ideas. And our intention is to hold regular forums such as this. Noted the comment about pre-application advice. I think Dawn's already covered that. We are aware also that there have been problems with legal instructions. We're as frustrated as you are in terms of delays in getting application to lawyers. They, like us, have been struggling to recruit lawyers to deal with it and to pass it on, because it's, even if we outsource them, there's still a process that has to be gone through to provide the instructions to the outsourced service. We are aware that they have recently recruited 2 locum planning lawyers, so we're hoping that that situation will now improve. And yes, we do have conservation officers across the piece, and indeed we have recently got an agency person in the conservation post in order to provide cover. So there are conservation officers across the piece. The person who's in charge of that team is Fiona Webb. So if you have any queries, I suggest you get in touch with her.
I was just going to say, it's the point that comes up a couple of times in the questions in terms of DMT to be viewing proposals positively and proactively. I would love to get to that position, but we are not there in the area teams. But this is why we are promoting the PPA approach. If you're paying for a PPA approach, you have the resource to have the time to negotiate with the case officer. It's not ideal. I wouldn't be doing it if there was any other way around it. But in terms of capacity, this is where we are stuck at the moment. If you want us to determine applications and get through applications, we need to determine them as quickly as possible. And we've got a 3-year backlog because of the phosphates. So unfortunately, it is a hard line we're putting in at the moment. This is one of the reasons I wanted to raise it with you guys before it goes on the website. But we will be supporting officers to try and get through this as gently as possible.
We will consider whether or not to bring back in-person agents forums, but we won't be holding individual agents forums for the different teams because we are trying to have a consistent approach across the authority, and that's the rationale behind having a single validation checklist, which Gary will talk to you about in a minute. But we will certainly think about whether or not we should hold in-person meetings because of the geographical size of the authority. We're not sure how well attended they would be.
There's also a comment about pre-app. If we are encouraging people to go down the pre-app route, there are issues that there's no statutory timeframes and there have been delays in responses. That is the case. What we are saying is we are giving higher priority to pre-apps because they can be dealt with a lot quicker than planning applications. and they would result in better schemes. So ultimately, we are going to be increasing the priority of pre-apps as we recover the planning backlog. But it's, you know, we have only so many people and so much work to do.
And notice the comment about use of conditions rather than legal agreements. We always keep that under review, but the current advice at the moment is that we do need Section 106s for phosphate mitigation with BMG. We'll come back to talk a bit more about the current position of phosphates later. Just going through, I'm going to take a couple.
I was just wondering, so one of the comments in particular said that this type of forum isn't particularly collaborative or useful. So I haven't discussed this, and Alison might kick me under the table for this, but I'm quite happy to take a question if someone hasn't typed it. If someone wants to take themselves off mute and ask a question or stick their hand up, I'm happy to do that as well. You know, we are still learning about combining technology and meetings, and we're trying to do the best we can over the geography we've got. But in terms of engagement, we are trying to be open and accessible to you. So if there's another way for people to ask questions, or if anyone's got any points they want to raise that they haven't typed, I'm more than happy to listen to anyone now.
There aren't any hands raised. I'm going to suggest that we move on to the second. Sorry, you just raised your hand in time. You want to ask your question?
Thank you very much, Dawn. Thank you for being so open. It's much appreciated, and so crucial for the growth of the county, never mind the country, that we make this planning system work more efficiently. My little question is twofold. One is we've been asked to enter PPAs for projects that we've been planning on for a very long period of time, and it seems rather odd to be taking more money out of us at a point at which we are expecting to be given positive approval. It just feels wrong, but if it jumps us up the queue, then probably that's what we have to do. So I'd quite like to understand the thinking behind the PPA and what it's going to mean for us contractually. And the other thing is, I'd very much like to carry on this conversation. If I may, I'd like to be able to draw together a summary of what many other house builders are keen to share in terms of how to drive forward a better environment for everybody. I sit on a forum of 200 other house builders, and if I may, I'll share a summary to yourselves if that's of interest, because I think it could be quite productive.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful. We're always open to ideas. I think we're all very conscious that we're not providing the service that we would like to provide, and we need to try and stabilise the service in order to try and then deliver a service which is more customer friendly than it currently is. In terms of the planning performance agreements, the rationale behind that is if we have a planning performance agreement, we can make sure that we have dedicated resource, not just from the planning authority, but also from our colleagues in the transport team and the local flood authority and the ecology team. So it's about trying to have a more collaborative approach with them and make sure that we have their buy-in to delivering their comments and engagement within a specified time frame.
I think the other thing to expand on the PPA is that it's a growing team, and the more PPAs we get, the more staff we can justify sort of getting on the PPA, because we as a local authority cannot make a profit, even though you may think that the sums are little eye-watering relative to what pre-app used to be. But it's a cost neutral process. It pays for the member of staff that's dealing with those submissions. And if it gets up and running as an economic model, which we're not quite there yet, I've got a new starter who started on the PPA team Wednesday. So she has no applications. Well, I say that I've allocated her 5 already, but so I've got a new member of staff that's available to allocate work to, that is taking pressure off the rest of the team. The rest of the team are struggling with caseloads in excess of 50 and just haven't got capacity to give that level of service.
Right.
Dawn, thank you for that. I think the lady in question, might be Rachel. I don't know. We met her yesterday, and very
Yes.
exciting to see that there are new people coming in.
Yeah.
And I think if the PPA is clearly to employ somebody dedicated to our projects, then we would be supportive of that, although it does seem odd that we put in our planning fees and would expect to go through a process. But we will support if that is the way it's going to work. Thank you for explaining it.
No worries.
Okay, I'm going to move us on now to Gary.
Okay, I'll pull up my presentation. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that and can hear me okay. Yes, so thank you for your time this morning. Yeah, as colleagues have said, my name's Gary Collins. I'm the Development Management Area Manager for the North and West teams. I've been here around 3 months, so had a bit of time to kind of understand more about the authority and the challenges that we have. And one of the key pieces of work I've been given is to create a single validation list for the authority. As you are probably very aware, we have at the moment 4 separate validation lists that you have to use depending on which part of the county that you're making your planning application within. And there they are on the screen there, just to remind you. Just wait for my slides to move forward. There we go. Yes, so there's 4 at the moment. This is excluding the minerals and waste one. There is a bespoke minerals and waste validation list for those specialist type of applications. These are for every other kind of planning application that you have to make. And some of the obvious drawbacks of having 4 different lists within a single planning authority is that they all have different expiry dates, because they, through legislation, they have to be reviewed every 2 years. They have 2 different types of layout. So 2 have one type of layout, 2 have another. So again, if you're making applications across the county, you're confronted with different layouts and formats within the validation list. And also, because they were written separately, they set out different information requirements for your planning applications at validation stage. Now, in some cases, that is justified because, of course, those 4 areas are still covered by different adopted local plans. Of course, the West area is actually covered by 2, and there are some other subject-specific issues within areas that I'll come on to very briefly. So 4 at the moment, not ideal. So our goal is to create a single list. Quite a piece of work, actually, trying to bring 4 together. We have tried to be as ruthless as possible, really challenge ourselves in terms of the information that we are asking from you at the application stage, because we understand that is a burden on you and your clients. However, there is a real advantage in having as much relevant information with your application on day 1. And so the benefits of having a single list is that there will be 1 expiry date. So once we've consulted on this and had it formally adopted, we'll have to review the single list going forward at least every 2 years, and that will always be the subject of consultation as well. A single list, by definition, will be easier to follow. We've chosen, hopefully, the most straightforward format, so it's grouped into different types of application as you go through the documents. And also, because it's 1 list, there should be consistent requirements for information that's required to submit with your planning application. But as I mentioned, it's only 1 or 2 examples, but there are some area differences that are clearly set out in the draft validation list. You'll see they're justified because there are some different policy contexts, and in particular there's a specific requirement for areas affected by phosphates. I'll come on to that briefly as well shortly. So I know validation lists can be a contentious issue, and I've sometimes see commentary about why have one at all, because obviously there is a national requirement for validation. That's very light touch, and really our justification in terms of having a validation list still is that, as you've heard from Dawn and from Alison, we want to deliver a really efficient and quality service for you and your clients, and for the residents and the stakeholders of Somerset as well. We really strongly feel that we need to be in receipt of good quality planning applications in order to do that. Anecdotally, I'm told that maybe 1 in 5 gets validated first time, and I'm sure that doesn't involve anyone on this call, but it's certainly, we've got to raise the bar in terms of the quality of applications that we receive, and certainly we can start looking at where some of the common mistakes are and kind of engage with agents around that. So a validation list is important because, you know, if there's information that is needed to determine an application, and that's the key test of anything that goes on the validation list, it's much better that the local planning authority receives that on day one, rather than us spending time and you spending time and resource chasing this information during the life of the application. And one reason for that as well, if we receive an additional piece of key information during the life of the application, we're probably going to have to reconsult on that. So that's a cost to us, it's delay to you and to us as well. So if we can get applications right first time on day one, it's for everyone's benefit. And also looking outside to those who will comment on planning applications, ranging from stakeholders, parish and town councils, consultees, both statutory and non-statutory. If we're clearly setting out the information requirements that we have for planning applications, it helps manage the expectations of everyone out there who's participating in the planning process. So it's a document that you'll see very shortly. I'll come on to that in a moment. But in terms of what's new in the single validation list, looking at the different approaches that are in the validation list at the moment, we're looking to have a much tighter window in terms of us requesting any additional information that's not there, and kind of waiting for that really. So what we'll do, we'll set some real clear information requirements. If it's not all there, we'll set a very clear timescale for when we need to receive that, and we won't keep chasing, to be honest with you, because that's wasted resource for us, and that's applications that we're chasing that are of poor quality, and it's stopping us getting to your good quality applications. So we're tightening up that window, but again, that's subject to the consultation process. And whilst we can't say that we won't receive paper applications anymore, obviously it's less efficient to process paper applications. So we're putting more of an emphasis on the digital submissions through the planning portal and other means. Obviously, we still accept paper applications, but in terms of the hierarchy within the document, in terms of how we'd like to receive planning applications, digital is a clear preference, and that's what's listed first. In terms of the situation in the county on nutrient neutrality, there's a report that we've been asking for some time now during the life of applications, the NAMS, the Nutrient Neutrality Assessment and Mitigation Strategy. And it's really clear to us that for sites that trigger that requirement in areas that are affected by phosphates, for everyone's benefit, we need that report with the application. So we're proposing to make that a validation requirement for phosphate affected development alongside the phosphate budget calculation. It just gets us to the discussion around mitigation and how that can be delivered much more quickly during the application if we can actually start that conversation from day one. We're also taking a consistent approach to biodiversity net gain, which is obviously still a rather new requirement for all of us. So that will be set out in the list as well. And then finally as well, from consultations internally, there's a real benefit in lots of developments having on day one at least either a site waste management plan or a site waste management statement to clarify how waste and recycling will be handled for individual developments. So they're the main additions that you'll see in terms of the validation list. So in terms of next steps, we've done some extensive internal consultation, and importantly with our validation teams as well, because they will be the front line in this, and we want them to be able to use it positively, proactively. So we've done a lot of officer consultation. We need to broaden that out to members now as well, in terms of the chairs of the various planning committees, and also we will engage with the portfolio holder on the draft list and seek his agreement to go out to consultation. We'll publicise that. It will be a 6-week consultation process. At the end of that, we will fully consider all the comments that we receive, and then once we've taken that into account, we will finalise the list for formal adoption, which again will be through the authority of the portfolio holder, and that will then be published on our website. So then, I said before, it lasts for 2 years, and so we will review that document within the 2 years as well. So hopefully that was a useful outline of the work that we've been doing on this, and happy to take any questions.
Gary, there's one question or comment here. I heard that 70% of applications are not registered first time in Somerset. Many of this agents don't, and we generally do try really hard. If I'm honest, it sometimes feels like a stalling tactic, and it's not helped by Somerset having the most onerous BNG validation requirements compared to everyone else. There needs to be a serious look at what agents are doing wrong, clearly, but also where officers are being overly dogmatic. As an example, why am I being asked to provide written confirmation that I have the architect's blessing to submit the drawing?
Okay. So, in particular, in terms of BNG, obviously we're happy to look at what other authorities are doing. So, we're all looking to implement this at the same time, and obviously it's in there as a mandatory requirement. That there is a established approach we've got that we're putting in this draft validation list, and happy to take consultation comments during that process, really. And if it is seen as too onerous, then obviously we can reconsider that, and we can certainly look at what nearby authorities are doing as well. In terms of stalling, I think that part of the engagement on the validation list has been about, we want applications to kind of get to the officers as soon as possible. And so that 70%, that's what my understanding is a very high kind of failure rate of applications validated first time around. And I think, as we are looking at the validation list and waiting for the consultation comments, we can do some engagement with our validation teams to say what are the common issues generally in terms of why applications are not being validated first time of asking, and we can do some sort of specific communications on that as well.
My understanding that a lot of it is because we don't get the fee up first time, so which is a basic requirement.
Yeah. And that's a national requirement as well. That's not that's a legal requirement.
Yeah. So for sites that trigger the nutrient statements and shadow habitat regulations assessments, could the LPA approve these as part of the pre-application process if submitted? This will make the planning application process quicker. Yes, it will, but if the application changes during the lifetime of the of it, then it would trigger having to be redone. We also have a requirement, obviously, to consult Natural England on those as well. So we will certainly look to see whether or not we could do that as part of the pre-application process. Obviously, we would need to consult our ecology colleagues to see if they would be have got the resource in order to do that. Certainly have a look at it, but I just put a bit of a health warning on that because of changes through the application process, and therefore then potentially having to redo it at a later stage.
So I've answered the same question in the chat, but effectively the warning ticket that I would have would also be, it depends on the time between time frame between the pre-app and getting the decision notice, because ecology reports also do go out of date. If it's a small scale scheme that needs it, then I can see there'd be value in that approach. Technically, the application still needs a consultation with Ecology and Natural England for sign off. But if it's all sort of signed up to and evidence as part of pre-app, that could make some efficiency. So I'm more than happy to look at that, but will be scheme dependent and obviously on the proviso that nothing is changing between pre-app and determination.
Okay, I don't think there are any other significant questions. Are there anybody who wants to ask a question in person? If you want to raise your hand now, we'll take a few more questions and then we'll break for 5 minutes or so before we start the phosphates.
James.
James Adele? Yeah.
Oh yeah, hi, thank you for taking the question. I just wondered whether or not with validation, when I used to work for Mendip or other councils in the past, we used to have a system whereby with validation that there were certain agents who were, you know, consistently getting applications validated. So they would almost have like a speed track system that if you saw their application, you would get it through the system quicker. I just wonder if that's an option and an incentive for agents to get onto that list, if you like.
Yeah, I've certainly operated systems like that where if agents consistently have good quality applications, they get onto a list, which means they are fast tracked through the process. We can certainly look at that. Basically, that means accepting their applications as being valid without doing all the checks. But obviously, if they then fall foul of that, then they would get removed off the list. I can't see any other hands up. Is
there is just one question about submission of planning applications through the portal, because obviously the planning portal doesn't give you the application. At the moment, we are trying to align consistency across the authorities. So in some areas, you can only submit the application through the portal. There isn't an alternative method. In other areas, there are still applications being submitted outside of the portal. The disadvantage of the portal is it does come with its special admin fee, which is on top of the planning fee. So that's the reason we haven't consolidated that approach yet. But obviously, it does come with the benefit for us, from our perspective, that we don't get it until the planning fees paid. But it is aligning how we are receiving applications is one of the things that we're looking at.
Okay, I can't see any more hands up, so I suggest we break now. We start at 10 o'clock.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's 10 o'clock, so we'll get going on the second part of the Planning Agents Developers Forum, which, as billed earlier, is an update on phosphates, which will be presented primarily by Kate Murdoch and Paul Browning. So I'm going to hand over to them. There will be an opportunity at the end for questions.
Thank you, Alison. Good morning, all. I trust you can all hear me. My name is Paul Browning. I'm a Principal Planning Officer. I'll be dealing with the first part of this presentation. Our presentation covers a number of aspects. First of all, update on recent work we've undertaken in relation to nutrient neutrality with regard to the Somerset levels and moors around our site, but also give a short update on the River Axe Special Protection Area. That's the SAC. That's the River Axe that flows southwards into East Devon. Moving on, we'll then give an update on where we are on recent government announcements and changes to legislation. That's going to be a quite short part of the presentation. Then we will go on to the local nutrient mitigation fund. As you're aware, the council were awarded 9.6 million from central government to increase the supply of phosphate mitigation projects to unlock impacted developments. Then we will go on, it's not on this slide, to a little section regarding pre-commencement conditions. That's a matter we raised at our last strategic planning committee meeting in September. And lastly, we'll come up and summarise where we've got to date. In terms of background, not proposing to go into this much detail. We've done this on numerous occasions at various presentations, including these Asian Forum meetings. But as you're aware, in August 2020, we received, and in fact, all the districts and Dorset Council received a letter from Natural England concerning unacceptable levels of phosphates on the Somerset levels and moors around our sites. As a result, a large proportion of new development, particularly housing, but there are other forms of development impacted, need to demonstrate nutrient neutrality. If you need further information, please visit our website, which we do try and keep up to date as quickly as possible. Moving on, in terms of updates across Somerset. In terms of the phosphate calculator, this has been alluded to in the previous presentation by Gary. It's required on planning applications that have got required nutrient neutrality. We are doing technical updates to reflect lower household size of 2.03, but we are awaiting Natural England's response to those matters. We have chased them up. Similarly, we're also working on what we call stretch permits at 3 wastewater treatment works. They're at Wales, Taunton and Langport. These upgrades will significantly reduce the nutrient loads from wastewater treatment works in those designated areas, whilst also reducing the average cost for the nutrient mitigation for developers. We've given worked examples in our committee report of September the 16th, if you want to see how that affects potential planning applications. We are currently updating the calculator. In the next week or so, the new update will be on our website. In terms of the legal, as you know, the Jerston Farm Wellington appeal has become what we call a national test case in relation to nutrient neutrality. In dismissing the appeals in August 2022, the High Court then dismissed the challenge by CJ Fry and Son, the operations of the Habitat Assessment in June 2023. This summer and June of this year, the Court of Appeal handed down their judgment. They dismissed the appeal on all 3 grounds. In terms of what that means for not only Somerset, but also across the country, it has confirmed the Council's positions that Regulation 63 of the Conservation and Habitats Regulation and Species Regulation Assessment applies to the determination of reserve matters approvals and the discharging of planning conditions, even if those conditions do not relate to drainage matters. Applicants have now applied to leave for appeal on this matter to the Supreme Court, but we await to see whether or not leave has been granted. In terms of catchment area updates, these reflect the updates that we gave to the Strategic Planning Committee at the beginning or early September of this year. First of all, in terms of the River Axe catchment area, as I've explained, the River Axe catchment area is a special area of conservation, the SAC. It's not part of the Somerset Levels and Moors Ramsar site. Somerset Council are not the lead authority. East Devon District Council are the lead authority on this catchment. Using our collective experience of our experience gained through mitigation fund round 1 bids, officers of both Somerset Council and Dorset Council assisted East Devon in submitting their round 2 bid for funds. To date, no government announcement has been given on whether the bid was successful, not only for East Devon, but all for other local authorities that submitted round 2. If you want to acquire further information, this slide gives you the link to the government website, where you can see more information about expressions of interest and other information regarding round 2 bids. In terms of turning our attention to the Somerset Levels and Moors Ramsar site, I'm just going to do a catchment area river by river. First of all, the Brew. This slide here summarises where we are in terms of the overall number of applications that are being signed off through P credit schemes. You can see there are a number of schemes and bullet points. I'm not going to go through the details and the number of dwellings affected. If you want to see more information about that, please visit our website and the committee report of September. Likewise, we gave updates to the River Parrett scheme. As you can see there, the number of schemes waiting for solution has fallen to 3,000 dwellings subject to live applications, and a further 1,000 benefiting from a resolution to approve permissions for phosphates. But bear in mind that some of these applications are awaiting Section 106 agreements, and you've heard from the previous presentation how there have been delays on that aspect. Moving on, bear in mind also, in this area, there is what we call a third-party provider, Entrade, operating this catchment area. Previously, we've explained what Entrade is. It's an arm's length part of Wessex Water for environmental solutions. They have got their own website, and you can go and visit their website to find more information if you so wish to. In terms of the River Tone, currently, there are about just over 100 planning applications, 111 we gave at that time. It does vary because, as you know, planning applications are determined, new applications come in, etc. So it's only a snapshot in time. Currently, this equates to approximately 2,600 dwellings. Be also mindful that in terms of the river catchment areas, the River Tone Credit Scheme is a council-run scheme that was initially implemented by Somerset West and Taunton. What we've given there is the number of planning applications that have been resolved and unlocked in terms of rounds 1, 2 and 3. Bear in mind that the purpose of this scheme was for SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, because when we had the neutrality letter from Natural England in August 2020, a vast majority of those planning applications were stuck in the planning system. They were often brownfield sites within urban context. They had no real opportunity to actually address their mitigation measures on site. Be also mindful that we also got a variety of third-party credit schemes around the council areas in terms of the river catchments. I've given a number of them here. The Boroughs Environmental, please note I've given an update that Boroughs, after our meeting on September, they gave us an update position at the beginning of September, which is not captured in this slide here. We also have third-party providers from Five Oak Farm and also from WCI. Also, planning applications, just like to emphasise, are progressing in the River Tone area where the applicant has provided their own mitigation measures. Some notable examples are our Staple Grove West strategic site, also Monkton Heathfield. Also, there's a following land agreement with the Comitro extension. This slide here tries to summarise where we are across the piece, pulling together the information across the 3 river catchment areas affected, i.e. the Brew, the Parrett and the Tone. The First of all, the two at the top, the green boxes, the consented awaiting Section 106 agreement. There are approximately 1,500 homes in that category. The unlocked to date, 4,700. Already, they have mitigation measures in place, i.e. nutrient neutrality is not an issue impeding the application being determined. Moving on down, we've got the ambers, as they're in light brown and as shown on this slide, awaiting a phosphate solution, 6,300. Action is being undertaken by the council outlined in this note, seeking help to unlock this development. And then we've got the balance, 5,500. No mitigation required yet. These are planning applications associated with future applications that have yet to come into the system, or local plan allocations that have yet to actually move to the outline stage. Bear in mind that collectively that results in 18,000 homes, which is where we basically said this authority was affected when we initially had the Natural England letter. So in terms of seeing the wood for the trees, view it like roughly a third of planning applications development has been unlocked, a third is waiting solution, but a third is still in the pipeline. So we're on a journey moving forward in terms of phosphate mitigation measures. In terms of other matters, be aware that there is a technical officer working group for the Somerset levels and moors. The council is seeking costings from Natural England to provide baselining information similar to that taken by Poole Harbour. For those of you who know Poole Harbour, there was a successful High Court challenge whereby Natural England and others had to do significant amount of baselining technical information and data regarding the Poole Harbour area, which is affected by both phosphates and nitrates. We have asked Natural England to provide some costings, provide the same level of evidence and measures. We will update members and those on this meeting in due course when we have that information and we've validated the issues that need to be addressed. Moving on, consultation on the revised National Planning Policy Framework. That was out until the 24th of this month, or last month, I should say. To those ends, this council submitted technical responses to the questions asked. In terms of relating that to nutrient neutrality, within the revised National Planning Policy document, there were currently no proposed changes or weakening of policies afforded to protection of designated sites, such as the Somerset levels and moors Ramsar sites. If you need more information, we provided the link there on this slide. Moving on to other matters. In May of this year, DEFRA family advised the council of the invalid designation of the Somerset levels and moors Ramsar site as a phosphorus census catchment area. This error has been rectified by central government. The catchment area has been made with reference to the special protection area. It covers the same geographical extent. To avoid unnecessary uncertainty associated with this technical error, statutory upgrades to technical achievable limits would have gone, or potentially have gone, back to the 16th of May 2031. To avoid that uncertainty, the council have also obtained its own reassurance from Wessex Water and Natural England that permanent compliance with the nutrient pollution standards to TAL, technical achievable limits, will still be the 1st of April 2030. To those ends, our committee report of September had a signed memorandum of understanding signed by both Natural England and Wessex Water to say that could be achieved. So that has removed the uncertainty. Once again, we've also given you the hyperlink for more information should you so wish to. In terms of local nutrient mitigation fund updates, I'm now going to pass over to my colleague, Kate.
Hi everyone, my name is Kate Murdoch. I'm the Service Manager for Strategic Policy and Implementation. I'm just going to run you through an update on where we are with the Nutrient Mitigation Fund award. As you're aware, we awarded the money back in December 2023. We received the money some of it towards the end of the financial year 23-24, and the balance of the funding in May this year. We're working to a very challenging timescale where we have to have committed spend in place by the 31st of March 2025. And then longer term, the idea with the funding is to keep recycling it in order to increase the supply of nutrient mitigation schemes and credits available to the market. And the longer term use of that funding is we're able to put that into the restoration of the Somerset levels and moors once there is sufficient supply in the market to unlock future housing development. We took the interim delivery strategy, was all approved by the Strategic Planning Committee back in March this year, and we provided an update to the Strategic Planning Committee on the 16th of September, and all the papers and reports that supported that are all available on our website. What we're trying to deliver through this is supporting other wider benefits in addition to nutrient mitigation, where we're looking to stack benefits to support biodiversity net gain market, water quality and also flood management, and where possible public access. So I'm just going to run you through the projects that we're supporting with the funding. We are aware that there is an increasing supply now of permanent credits on the market. There is, however, an issue with the temporary bridging credit market. So these are credits that applicants will need to mitigate at that lower level post 2030, but just mitigating at a higher level with bridging credits supporting that between now and 2030. So we are doing work to support that market. We are supporting a pre-treatment trial with Salinity Solutions, which is a reverse batch osmosis technology that acts as a secondary treatment process on wastewater treatment works. That trial has now commenced, and the purpose of the trial is to establish the cost of a temporary P credit. If the outcome of that trial is that those credits are not cost effective, it will not proceed. But we, along with a number of other authorities, are trialling new kind of technology, and there are other local authorities looking to see the outcome of that trial. You may well be aware that the council launched an environmental call for sites. That ran between May and July. It was being very successful. In total, we've had 70 sites submitted, 8 of which were purely for phosphate mitigation. 35 were just for biodiversity net gain, but 24 were looking to both deliver phosphate mitigation and biodiversity net gain. So stacking the 2 environmental credits, the same land holding, which they are able to do. We've run all those sites through an initial stage 1 assessment process, and the outcome of that is the sites have then been ranked. So we've got 12 sites that are currently in what we call tranche 1, where the full assessments have all been completed, and we're now entering into negotiations. The tranche 2 sites, which we've got 13, with these site assessment process for these is now fully underway. And then we've got the tranche 3 sites, which we'll be assessing in more detail later in the year. The way they've been ranked is based on how early they were submitted. So we had a midpoint cutoff to encourage promoters to submit as early as possible. And if they got all the information and it's been signed off by Natural England, it's supported in that tranche 1. And the tranche 2 sites, similar process. Tranche 3 are some of the sites that haven't necessarily met all the requirements for the submission, and therefore it's not that they won't be something that we might look at longer term, but they're not considered as deliverable as the ones in tranche 1 and 2. So this just flags up how many kilograms of P credits could be available from those tranche 1 and 2 sites, and the geographical spread across the different river catchments. If the council were to pursue purchasing all of those credits in the on the basis of the offer that those credits are being made available, we wouldn't have sufficient funding. But we are looking to prioritise the funding to deliver the best value for money credits and those that are deliverable and ready to go. So we're in negotiation on those at the moment. But where we don't look to purchase those P credits, we will still support those site promoters with a legal agreement and signpost them on our website alongside all the other third-party credit providers. But what's clear from this is that the supply of phosphate credits is increasing significantly. And the hope is with that the price of those P credits will start to come down, especially now landowners are starting to be more aware of the fact that they can stack biodiversity net gain with their phosphate credits. So we should be able to bring the price of both of those down, but still make a comfortable return that makes it an attractive offer for landowners to consider. And there is also a greater realisation now that the best location is on land that's often waterlogged, so not suitable for, certainly not suitable for development. And given the very winter that we've had and summer, to be fair, also not always very great locations for agricultural production. So I think landowners are starting to recognise how to make use of their land in a way that gives them suitable income, but then they're prioritising the areas of land that aren't necessarily suitable for agricultural production. Project 3, we're also working with registered social housing providers and supporting colleagues with our council property stock in upgrading septic tanks with packaged treatment plants. And we've allocated funding to the housing revenue account, and they're now moving forward to deliver those septic tank upgrades. And that will also release another 30 credits via the council scheme. We've been working closely with our colleagues in the strategic assets team, looking at the land holdings across Somerset, and there's some feasibility studies underway to look at both phosphate mitigation opportunities, but biodiversity net gain opportunities on those land holdings. And we're also working on a trial on council-owned land, looking to trial miscanthus grass. This is an alternative to fallowing land, and again another measure where we're looking to support the temporary credit market. This is essentially the same as the landowner signing up to a fallowing land agreement, but in planting the crop they're able to still get a return. They don't have to apply fertilisers, and they're still getting an income stream from that crop. And then in putting the crop in the early days, it's de-risked by the phosphate mitigation funding. If the trial demonstrates it delivers additional benefits, then we will capture that at a later stage. But at this stage, we're just looking at an alternative to a fallowing land agreement so that we can look to bring the price of those temporary credits down in the market. We're also running a trial on some of the council housing stock where we're looking to introduce water flow control devices. We're just looking to trial those in some of the properties that become vacant to understand what impact it does actually have on the water pressure within the property. We are aware that some local authorities are rolling this out as part of their nutrient mitigation funding elsewhere, but we just want to understand how the technology works and whether it does impact on the water pressure in the properties. So we have done an initial assessment of the future supply and demand for nutrient mitigation across the river catchments. And you can see the details of that in the Strategic Plan Committee report that went on the 16th of September. That's all in Appendix 4. But what we would like to flag up is that these are based on the current annual housing requirement for each of the river catchment areas. You may well be aware that the government standard methodology that they're consulting on at the moment would see a significant uplift in the housing requirement for Somerset in the region of 46%. Until we know the outcome of that consultation, we are just looking at Somerset's current housing requirement.
Right, so across Somerset now, just be aware, we're conscious that through these presentations, we've often outlined a significant amount of information to you. What this slide here does is actually say, look, there are various templates, useful informations are on our website. Please use them. We'll try to assist you as much as possible in terms of making sure you've got a, inverted commas, one-stop shop for all the proposed developments that are caught by phosphate matters. We've on our webpage, as already presented by my colleague Kate, we list all the third-party providers that have legal agreements with us, so we know they are from a legitimate source. They are there, the website links to their websites. It gives you a range of providers which you can then follow up should you require, because these days we understand that quite a lot of the planning applications are bespoke. They involve both on and off-site mitigation measures and sometimes P credits from third-party providers. As mentioned previously, we took a committee report to our Strategic Planning Committee in September this year. One of the proposals was an issue around setting out, exploring the issue around a pre-commencement condition where phosphate mitigation is secured via pre-commencement condition rather than having phosphate mitigation in place at the planning application stage. It is understood that securing a phosphate mitigation prior to determination can impact on cash flows, because that's the feedback we're getting. Also associate the delays in terms of drafting section 1 and 6 agreements, and also there are delays around the commencement of the development and the construction program. So we've been listening to you. We've highlighted the fact as a matter to look at further, and we said we would raise a few pointers at our presentation here today on that. As we said, there are a number of phosphate mitigation providers that have increased the overall supply of phosphate mitigation. And so we would like to move to a position where phosphates can be secured later in the planning process to support development. So in summary, what's the current approach? Now, this is a summary and it sometimes does vary depending on individual planning applications. But in summary, to use a pre-commencement conditions, we only accept credits from established third-party providers. In terms of the mitigation, these are required by Natural England, the DAS letters and the necessary legal agreements we put in place in perpetuity. The applicant needs to submit a nutrient neutrality assessment and a mitigation strategy and a shadow HRA alongside the planning application, which outlines the nutrient loading from their development and the proposed approach. That involves the phosphate calculator, for example. Moving on, when the applicant is proposing to use established providers, we require a reservation notice, i.e. evidence that you, the applicant, have secured or reserved the appropriate amount of mitigation in terms of P credits, and that is from a registered provider. And this gives us, the local planning authority, the assurance that there is reasonable prospect that mitigation can be secured. The planning decision is then made and a pre-commencement condition is used to require a receipt for the nutrient credits submitted in the form of an allocation certificate. If the applicant chooses an alternative mitigation option, they will need to submit details, including NAMs, shadow HRAs, the data letter, etc., and any necessary legal agreements in place before the pre-commencement condition is signed off. Sounds complicated, but that's a summary of what usually happens in our current approach. Some applicants have said we should move to a pre-occupation condition. As officers, we have discussed that, and at this time we are proposing that we're not going to pursue a pre-occupation condition. The reasons for that are, first of all, it's harder to enforce and delays recycling the council's money, and the nutrient mitigation fund monies, as my colleague Kate said, is very challenging, and we need to recycle this money sooner rather than later. So if we went to a pre-occupation condition, there will be a time lag between commencement and occupation. That means that money is not being recycled into nature-based solutions, which ultimately aim to restore the Somerset levels and moors to a favourable condition. So Somerset Council will continue to monitor policy to ensure that both aligns to the phosphate mitigation and is appropriately legally secured. So where we're trying to get to, if I move to the next slide, is where we would like to go. This is really the start of the discussion with you and those affected by nutrient neutrality. As set out in the committee report, we would like to move to a pre-commencement condition on approved planning applications. However, we need to make sure that there are sufficient credits available. As you've heard from Kate, there are further nutrient mitigation third-party providers through the call for sites coming forward. We've also seen from Boroughs Environmental that they are expanding their activity in terms of upgrading septic tanks in rural areas, and also WCI and others are also have entered the market. So the supply of P credits are expanding beyond the regional Somerset, Western Taunton, the Riverton P credits. We need to ensure that there is a range of credits in all of the free river catchment areas as well. What this means is that if there is a supply of these credits, it would mean that phosphate mitigation is not secured at the determination stage. Phosphate mitigation will be required at the discharge of condition stage, post-decision being issued. So that's a slight nuance there. It's moving the decision. However, a formal decision on moving to a pre-commencement decision is anticipated probably towards the end of the year, because as we've explained, we need to have these discussions with third-party providers through the Nutrient Mitigation Fund and understand what is going to be released and when. Furthermore, the council needs to make sure we are legally compliant, and to those ends, we need to also ensure that interested parties will be consulted, including those third-party providers already in the market, because it will also affect them as well. So we have got a number, but this is really the start of the discussion on this matter. But this is where we would like to go to. As I said, it's very much the issue about phosphate mitigation will be required at the discharge of condition stage, post-decision being issued. So finally, just a few key messages, because we're aware that we have been talking for about 30 minutes now. Until such time as the Somerset levels and moors returns to a favourable condition, planning applications will need to ensure that affected developments are nutrient neutral. We are awaiting Natural England advice on the costings of a baseline similar to that in Poole Harbour. Similarly, achieving TAL in 2030, as recently agreed with the stretch targets, that's another key point to remember in this presentation, will help stop pollution at source, but it will not bring the Somerset levels and moors back into a favourable condition. Nutrient neutrality is what it says on the can. It's nutrient neutral. It ensures that new development is nutrient neutral. These upgrades, as we've explained in the presentation, will significantly reduce nutrient loads from wastewater treatment works within the three designated catchment areas, i.e. the Brew, Parrett and Tone. Ideally, it should start reducing average costs of nutrient mitigation for developers, and also there is a lower requirement post 2030. However, until these upgrades are completed, higher level mitigation will be required. In terms of the Nutrient Mitigation Fund, the Council is committed to enabling a delivery programme, and hopefully you've seen that through the presentations we've given to our committee and to this forum today, to create more P credits in all the river catchment areas. The income which we will be reinvesting in nature-based solutions, as my colleague Kate explained. Developers still always have the option to find their own bespoke mitigation measures within their projects and also purchase P credits from third-party providers. And to those ends, we give a list of those third-party providers actively operating within the various catchment areas on our website. Overall, there's a range in terms of number and options of P credit available, and hopefully by expanding the third-party market and also what we're providing, mitigation solutions help to increase the supply of P credits, but also reduce the cost of P credits overall as we progress through time. I've come to the end of our presentation now. I'll pass back to Alison if she wants to add to any of the concluding remarks before we take questions.
No, I think I'll just take questions. There's been quite a lot of chat in the chat, which
answer it.
Kate was trying to answer it. So can I suggest if there are any questions that haven't been covered, that people put up their hands and we have a discussion on those now. Okay, is there anything you wanted to particularly pick up from the comments you put in the chat?
No, I think I've picked most of that. Nigel, you're absolutely right. This is the nutrient neutrality issue is a legal one. It's not a policy one, despite the fact that there are several people that seem to confuse the two. I think it is a policy that the council can control. And Sue, Councillor Osborne, just to come back on the land holding. So the initial calculations we've done is that the land that's been taken out for phosphate mitigation, and not all of that has actually been allocated yet, represents 0.1%, so less than 1% of the agricultural land available in the Somerset area. We will be doing an update report at the Strategic Planning Committee where we will try and break that down. But the funding cannot be used for grade 1 agricultural land. So we'll break down what element of that makes up the other grade 2 and grade 3A or B.
So one of the comments in the chat was, why have we moved from a position of being able to consider pre-commencement conditions? I think that goes down to the hopefully more certainty in the market in terms of the availability of credits and phosphate solutions. And we're hoping that once we get to the point where we've agreed the third-party credit schemes that are coming through the core sites, that we will have sufficient credits available in the market, that we have that certainty. The legal advice we have at the moment is that we don't yet have that certainty, so that's why potential delay in bringing that into play. But that's certainly where we would like to move towards. Okay, I've got a couple of hands up. Rebecca, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just stealing a question from Chris Winter, which was about, I think from our perspective, we generally have solutions, but we struggle then to get comments from phosphate officers, particularly in the West area. Is there any thinking behind that or any changes to that? Somebody else as well, I think it was Claire, asked a question about Section 73s and can you transfer credits from the principal permission to that? And just generally, what's the process around, because a lot of applications we're doing Section 73s to change our phosphate solution because it's gone on so long. So it's, phosphate officer resourcing, I suppose, and what's the easiest process if you need to change your phosphate strategy?
So we have brought in some additional resource to help with some of the backlog in the West area. So hopefully we'll see an improvement on that shortly. In terms of changing the phosphate solution on sites, yeah, I can understand that there is it's part of the backlog with other applicants trying to get some advice from the Ecology Service. So we are again aware that the resource issues in the Ecology Service, alongside needing to support biodiversity net gain, is an issue, and we are looking to make the case for additional resource in ecology. In terms, sorry, Rebecca, can I clarify your question about changes to your phosphate mitigation approach? Are you talking about where the requirement now, because of the 2030 upgrades, is reduced for a particular development?
I wasn't, but that's a really good point. No, I think I think it'd be helpful for everyone to know that there's two questions. Firstly, if you have a planning permission and you're using credits, but then you want to change those over to an amended Section 73 scheme, still using the same credits, is that easy enough to do? But also what we're finding on our schemes is that we were fallowing land because we got, the application was been running for the last 2 years. When we get to determine it and we actually look at building it out, we go, oh gosh, credits are a lot cheaper and easier. Maybe we'll do that instead. We're running Section 73s with nutrient neutrality assessments, but they're taking about a year to go through when we've already waited like 2 or 3 years to get the original planning permission. It's just whether there's an easier way of doing that. I would say at the moment as well, so for the phosphates, we're generally finding it's taking around 4 to 6 months to firstly get any comments from the phosphate officers, but then to actually agree a solution, and that's on sort of single dwellings as opposed to anything more major.
So I think we are aware of the problems and the delays, and particularly the capacity within the Ecology Service. Ecology Service sits in a different part of the council to the planning service, so we don't have the same amount of control over that as we perhaps do with resources within the service. But we are certainly engaging in dialogue with the Ecology Service. They, like us, have had problems with recruiting staff. And that's been a major factor, especially at the time when obviously they're dealing with BNG as well. So we can only apologise. We're aware of the problem. We're seeking to address it as best we can.
Thanks.
I did see Councillor Coles. I did see your hand go up. It's gone down now. Did you have a question?
Thank you. You answered it in one of your responses.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, so the next person I've got is Angus. Do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Sorry, me again. So we've got various projects now coming through planning, which is great after many years of being stuck. They all have very old phosphate approval packages with them, which in many ways will have been superseded with all the changes that have occurred, not least to your modelling system. So there's a slightly unusual scenario where the Section 106s are being signed on the basis of what's been approved at planning, which is appropriate. But then the world's moved on and we're going to need to come back to amend those Section 106s, probably just by upgrading the shadow HRA. Is this something that's been considered, and is the door open for that discussion once we've got the decision notices out and the Section 106 is signed?
I think the main issue is resources, but obviously if there are better solutions out there for you, yes, of course. I mean, it's always open to you to come back and seek to vary Section 106.
Thumbs up there.
Chris.
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks, Alison. Just following up from, just give Angus some feedback, and we're all in that boat, I think, where we're finding better solutions as time moves on. But, this resource issue is just crippling. It's deed of variations are taking a year to sort. You know, we're finding that people can't sell houses because of it. It's just somehow we've got to get past this, but it isn't just the legal side of it. It is instruction from the phosphate officers as well. It is taking forever. I don't know what we do about it, but it is just crippling us in terms of getting started on site and actually selling houses. And my other point, Kate, I know you sort of, I keep banging on about it, but and you pointed me in the direction of the report at the meeting, your committee meeting, but are we making any progress to actually see what the real impact of phosphates on the protected sites actually is, and how much is just generated from within the sites, from agriculture and everything else?
So at the moment, we've requested from Natural England, the Environment Agency, an understanding of what would be entailed in undertaking kind of technical study in the same way as they've done in the Poole Harbour. But again, that's not going to be a quick solution for many applicants, Chris, because we've already had the response from Natural England's assessment of Dr. Clegg's sampling work that he's done. And in order for us to be able to have any certainty, we have to go with the advice of the statutory body responsible for nature conservation, which is Natural England, because otherwise we just run the risk of increased legal challenge. So anything that we do in terms of work on understanding Somerset levels and moors and how the water flows, which we all know is very complicated, and most of several months of the year the whole thing floods, so water transfers between those Ramsar sites, that is essentially the response of Natural England. Whilst it might appear to some to be the kind of silver bullet, it's not going to be something that's going to happen quickly. And we already know from Poole Harbour that we're talking 5 years plus to do the work that they've got to. So you're absolutely right. There does need to be a better understanding of how water moves in these complex environments. That's not unique to the Somerset levels and moors. There's 47 of these areas caught across the country, and we often hear that the lack of evidence to understand what needs to happen to restore these locations is just not there. So it is an issue that has been raised, but I don't think it's the silver bullet that many people think it is. But we'll just have that work is running in parallel, and meanwhile we're just trying to increase the supply of nutrient credits to the market and support applicants as best we can with guidance and the availability of third-party credit schemes in the meantime. I appreciate that's not the answer you're looking for, Chris, but that's where we are.
Thanks for the update.
Okay, I can't see any other hands up. Are there any other further questions? Otherwise, I'll let you all get on with your days.
Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for attending the session today. We will be putting in further sessions at probably at 3 monthly intervals, and I will talk to the team about potentially doing an in-person session, likely to be in Taunton as the most convenient location, and the availability of a large enough room. Okay, with that, I'll say thank you very much, and we'll let you have the slides from today.